Hello, everyone. This is Denise Sheehan of Sage Spirit Coaching and Reiki and Sky Spirit Shamans. And I'm here today to offer a reading of a perspective paper. It's called Sky Spirit Shamans, a perspective paper on racism and cultural appropriation. Very important topic for us to look at. And so first, we acknowledge that our Sky Spirit Shamans program is situated on the traditional homelands of the Washoe or Washishu, and the Numu, the Northern Paiute. We honor and acknowledge them as well as other tribes, the Nuwu, the Western Shoshone, and Nuwu, the Southern Paiute peoples, along with all Indigenous peoples, past, present, and future, of the Americas and of all the continents on Earth. All these lands are sacred to Indigenous peoples, and we appreciate the opportunity to live, learn, and enjoy their territories. We aspire, in some small way, with the words that follow, to honor them all and to co-create a more aware, just, and equality-based world going forward. So this paper has been created with much support from alumni, from our students, and from other supporters in the community. So I'd just like to acknowledge Carolyn Smith, Christopher Daniels, Delok Patongley, Dana Bratcher, Daniel Kearns, Aaron Garrich, Hannah Seitz, Jessica Daylover, Julie Golden, Kelsey Bear, Matthew Embry, Rhonda Garrich, Tabor Griswold, Vanessa Lewandowski, Verena Blale, and Viola Goodwin. And I'd also like to give honorable mention to Timothy Gay and Wade Gaynor of Alchemist Movement at alchemistmovement.org, who have provided some training for us that was really, really beneficial. So, So this is what I have to share. One of the highest values that I have held my entire life is integrity. And this is expressed in both healthy ways, such as striving to reach personal and spiritual potential in my path of service, for example, and in unhealthy ways, such as workaholism and perfectionism. One shadow of perfectionism can be an unwillingness to look deep within at the secret, denied, or repressed aspects of the self, also called the personal unconscious or shadow. And this work takes fierce courage for most everyone. However, the gift and the allure of integrity has been my unceasing discovery of how I may be and do better in the world, never settling for anything less than what I believe to be ideal for the greater good, especially in my path of service. Since this journey is unceasing, there's a good chance I will never arrive at any standard that will feel like perfection or even completion. So in short, I acknowledge that I am flawed and that this paper is not a definitive truth. Rather, I invite you to a journey of discovery to help honor the spirit of healing that's so much needed in our world. Given my value of integrity, what right do I have, since I am in a white body, to create and teach a program called Sky Spirit Shamans during an era when we are awakening to the detrimental effects of racism, colonialism, and cultural appropriation? Perhaps no right at all, but I have lived and carried my medicine fully and honored it since I was first gifted it. I've done everything I know to make myself worthy in humbleness and humility. I may not have a right, but I do have a responsibility. And this paper offers my best thinking of where I am in the discovery of integrity in my practice and teaching of shamanism. And these thoughts are always subject to change as my consciousness expands. I welcome wisdom from any or all who read or hear this, and especially from people of color. We will explore more of the nature of shamans and shamanism later, but for now we touch on this. Shamanism is a term that's been used by anthropologists over time and across continents and cultures to apply to specific skill sets and roles in communities across geographical boundaries. These skill sets and roles are most often derived from Indigenous peoples and cultures, and they have become more and more infused into our modern day world, where many are seeking deeper experiences of life's mysteries and healing than what is found through Western cultures and medicines. For me, this is the conundrum I face each day. The earth and all her children are in peril. How may humanity choose to evolve in honoring and respectful ways of all life in this planet if we do not adopt the practices of the indigenous peoples, the ones who carry the wisdom of earth honoring ways? And if we are to adopt them, how may we do so with as much integrity and respect to indigenous peoples as possible? The theme of access to shamanic practices in the age of awareness of cultural appropriation has been an area of exploration for several of the students who are part of our Sky Spirit Shamans family as well. As such, in 2020, we formed a think tank for expanding our exploration of ethical issues, with emphasis on addressing racism, decolonization, and cultural appropriation. This paper, though told in my voice, offers a response and at times a summary of our collective wisdom that promises to be ongoing in nature as our personal and collective awareness expands. We seek to help illuminate the context of racism in our culture for anyone who might be interested. We especially hope to inspire those who identify as healers, light workers, medicine people, shamans, etc., to take a closer look at how our identification, wisdom, messages, and services show up in the broader context of the world in need of deeper healing in honoring and respecting all people, but especially people of color. We also intend that our exploration on integrity and ethics be shared as a gift to our broader community, especially for those who identify as healers, light workers, medicine people, etc., to stimulate critical collaborative thinking of the ethical issues that are inevitably experienced for the purpose of supporting the most accessible, beneficial, and enlightened spiritual services possible to all who receive that spiritual support. In this space, we will explore, first, the complexities of white culture, including matters of white privilege, racism, colonialism, supremacy, cultural appropriation, and how they may be addressed ethically. The role of oneness and its shadow of spiritual bypassing, as well as its guiding light in our evolution. Plus several prophecies that may inform our work as shamans, visionaries, and/or evolutionaries, and shamanism defined, and the context of Sky Spirit Shamans and our evolution in addressing cultural appropriation, racism, etc., that may be considered and/or adopted by others, and the utility of ethics in our evolution as shamanic practitioners, along with a working code of ethics that may inspire community participation in their refinement amongst light workers, with the intention of collectively providing ethical services across many populations. So, if any readers, especially white ones, are feeling uncomfortable at this stage of the reading, please know that this is a natural and necessary discomfort that may lead to an expanded awareness going forward. Although we will be touching on very sensitive issues around white privilege, racism, colonization, and cultural appropriation, and more, just know that this is a safe space to settle into exploring. In order to receive this information, please be grounded, embodied, and in a self-love centered space. Breathe and take breaks as needed, and check in for support. We highly recommend Rizma Menakem's book, My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies, as a resource for understanding and releasing the trauma response held in our bodies. Our minds are of limited use on this journey when we have trauma stored in our bodies. So regardless of skin color, race, ethnicity, or cultural backgrounds, We have all grown up in some ways programmed and traumatized by the reality of racism. Because of our brain developmental stages, we internalize everything we learn as an invisible truth during our first 7 or so years of life. It's our duty, each of us, to excavate and reveal this socialization to become more conscious, especially where we may otherwise cause harm to ourselves or others. This paper is not about blaming, even as we tell the hard truth. No one person can be held responsible for the totality of the wounding cultures we live in and that inform our beliefs about the world. There will also be messages of hope and unity, of the potential to co-create a truly honoring, just, and equitable world. This space is intended to create essential healing for us all, especially for people of color, and for spiritual entrepreneurs who care deeply about the consequences of the services we provide. And here is a quote from Menachem. Clear pain is about choosing integrity over fear. And there will be a list of references on the document that you can refer to. So, clean pain is about choosing integrity over fear. So, let's override our fear and reluctance to take a hard look at ourselves and our world, knowing we will arrive at a deeper understanding, each of us free to ponder, and these concepts, and we will let the deeper understanding, each of us free to ponder these concepts and let them inform us uniquely. So, here's the first section, the role of white culture and cultural appropriation. So let's just take a deep breath together first before we go forward, because this is some dense stuff to look at, and just honoring wherever we are in our energy bodies right now and letting go of trepidation, reminding ourselves that we're safe. So we'll begin with another quote by Tuck and Yang. Everything within a settler colonial society strains to destroy or assimilate the native in order to disappear them from the land. This is how a society can have multiple simultaneous and conflicting messages about Indigenous people, such as all Indians are dead, located in faraway reservations, that contemporary Indigenous peoples are less Indigenous than prior generations, and that all Americans are a little bit Indian. These desires to erase, to let time do its thing and wait for the older form of living to die out, or even to help speed things along, euthanize, because the death of a pre-modern ways of life is thought to be inevitable. These are all desires for another kind of resolve to the colonial situation, resolve through the absolute and total destruction or assimilation of original inhabitants, end quote. So, as I've seen in my national trainings on culture through my former career teaching about culture and other community health-related topics, white culture may be challenging to see, especially for white people in the United States, as its qualities may lie beneath our conscious awareness. For this reason, many people are drawn to other cultures, which has led to a vast assimilation of multicultural expression, often referred to as a melting pot in the United States. Related to the invisibility of white culture is a lack of awareness of white privilege and white supremacy. I grew up in South Florida during the volatile and sometimes violent desegregation of the public school system in the very early 70s. I felt frightened much of the time as hurling rocks, race riots, and bomb threats became routine experiences. Once, during a bomb threat, when all the 10-year-old children were standing vulnerably in front of the school, we had either a sniper threat or drill where we were ordered to lie down on our bellies on the hot blacktop. In many ways, I was aware of the untruth and harm of racism even as a child, but I wasn't always aware enough. And when I ponder some of the messages I received growing up in a white supremacist community, as well as ways I unconsciously bought into and contributed to it, I still cringe. The journey of unearthing the programming I received has been a lifelong journey. It's possible for white people to go through our entire lives without critically examining or acknowledging our race and the privileges afforded to us simply because we inhabit white bodies. Fortunately, so many of these aspects came into view during the events of 2020, continuing into 2021, especially around police brutality. And see the reference for Risma Menakem's My Grandmother's Hands for an excellent perspective on this problem. But what will we create from our expanding awareness? First, let's take a closer look. And so here is another quote from Risma Menakem. This has resulted in large numbers of Americans who are white, racist, and proud to be both. An even larger number who are white, racist, and in reflexive denial about it. And another large number who are white, progressive, and ashamed of their whiteness. All of these are forms of immaturity. All can be trauma responses, and all harm African Americans and white Americans. End quote. So, all cultures contain beauty as well as challenges and struggles. For the purposes of this discussion, we will pause to take a hard but essential look at white culture in the United States. We indeed have a settler colonial society that has invaded and dominated people of color, often to exploit human and other natural resources to benefit the dominant culture. White culture would be even accurately noted as white body supremacy, as noted and discussed brilliantly by Risma Menakem in My Grandmother's Hands. Historically, whiteness was a contrived construct created by plantation owners out of fears that their slaves of different races and ethnicities, including people we would now classify as white, would rise up and prove to be a powerful threat to systemic structures. Therefore, plantation owners lured poor white slaves and workers with the dangling carrot of power and wealth, separating them from black and brown bodies. Therefore, white culture speaks to the erasure of ethnicities, the supremacy of light-skinned bodies, and the domination over black and brown bodies. These dynamics have contributed to continued, ongoing systems of oppression that favor white, cisgender, heterosexual males, and able-bodied persons in experience. There is inherent privilege to those who qualify in all or most of these categories. In addition to slavery, inequality, racism, and genocide, white culture is also connected with the creation of ravaging technologies related to the Industrial Revolution, with related factors of exploitation, corporatization, capitalism, greed, consumerism, earth abuse, individualism, and competition, etc. And here is another quote from Menakem. Change culture and you change lives. You can also change the course of history. End quote. We cannot deny that white-bodied people have been responsible historically for genocide of indigenous and other non-white people, and for stripping those who remain of their individual, spiritual, and cultural identities. Risma Menakem also shares in great depth the degree of trauma stored in white-bodied people based on generations of brutality and trauma experienced and witnessed in Europe prior to the American colonies. As we explore ways to restore honor, integrity, and equity to races that have been undervalued and traumatized in our world, we are actually creating pathways that serve healing for all races. So let's narrow our lens to the natives of the Americas. Many in the indigenous tribes are not practicing their ways as a result of the very debilitating multi-generational trauma based on legislation banning native spiritual practices, forced acculturation, and on genocide. We, as white people, can't ask nor expect indigenous peoples to save us now that we've caused so much harm to the planet they desire to protect and support. Nor can we sidestep their role and wisdom as if we may show up as saviors at this late stage of the game. We will all have to heal our earth and our relations together. We will all have to rise up to correct the damage together, to co-create what has been called in prophecy the fifth world of peace, as we transcend the destructiveness of the fourth world of separation. And we will explore more of this and other prophecies further below. So, looking at the shadow of white culture, we may also see expressions of the light. There have been beneficial and healing technologies over time, of course. There have been champions of nature, of human rights, and more. We may ponder, could it be that the most beautiful values and expressions of loving care, community, and compassion, etc., in white culture come from more communal indigenous cultures, or that they are lost aspects of our cultures from long ago? These aspects, too, are beautiful and essential to explore and to encourage and support more expression. And here is another quote from Tuck and Yang. We observe that another component of a desire to play Indian is a settler desire to be made innocent, to find some mercy or relief in the face of relentlessness of settler guilt and haunting, directly and indirectly benefiting from the erasure and assimilation of indigenous peoples is a difficult reality for settlers to accept. The weight of this reality is uncomfortable. The misery of guilt makes one hurry toward any reprieve. End quote. So, the idea of playing Indian is to dance in the realm of cultural appropriation. Wikipedia notes that cultural appropriation is the adoption of an element or elements of one culture or identity by members of another culture or identity. This can be controversial when members of a dominant culture appropriate from disadvantaged minority cultures. So here's an example of both damaging legislation and cultural appropriation in historical context. In North America, Indigenous youth were sent to American Indian boarding schools beginning in the late 19th century and well into the 20th. Indigenous youth were stolen from their families, plus stripped of their languages, spirituality, and cultures to save their souls. At the same time, white families could purchase headdresses and other toys to pretend to be native. There were even clubs for mimicking natives. The freedom for indigenous peoples of the North Americas to practice spirituality was denied until the American Indian Religious Freedom Act in 1978. This act restored legal rights to practice traditional religious ceremonies, spiritual and cultural practices, plus access to sacred sites and use of sacred items. However, by then, much had been lost, and the fear of retribution to practice slowed to dissipate. As in this example, and in countless others, we see that across the Americas and throughout the world, so much spiritual wisdom has been hidden, lost, or compromised by the colonization of indigenous peoples and other people of color by white colonizers. For those of us who share indigenous wisdom as white spiritual practitioners, shamans, medicine people, etc., it's imperative that we be mindful of the dynamics of acting as if we have a right to practice and teach this wisdom. It's a sacred gift to offer, not a privilege that we're entitled to commodify. If we have come by this sacred knowledge and wisdom, it is through demonstration of trust from teacher to student across eras and geographies. That we may access and be entrusted with this wisdom at all is a profound miracle. One way to deepen our reflections on this is through our spiritual practices, meditations, and reflections of our own ancestral role in colonization. One way to give back is to serve in anti-colonial efforts, perhaps by championing Indigenous rights to land reclamation, to economic and political equality, and to ensure greater expressions of sovereignty. I have to confess that I too have identified profoundly and ideologically with Indigenous wisdom, culture, and spirituality for most of my life. When I began working with the tribes in the late 90s and into the 2000s, I quickly realized that my admiration, when expressed as imitation, was a form of disrespect. I completely honor that response, especially as it may reflect high levels of trauma and unhealed pain. When I have the opportunity to witness the pain of the colonized in presence and compassion, I come to honor the truth of all that's been lost. I let myself be in the unflinching vulnerability of questioning my whole life at the same time. It's only fair to let myself be torn apart, to let myself feel that pain of deepest questioning of my perceived identity and identification, as others have been in the claws of the white ravenous kind. Anger is completely just and my culpability complete, in that I have benefited from the privileges granted to those in this white-dominated world. Being white, I feel a deep and profound sense of shame at times in acknowledging this truth. And I know that shame is mine to heal, to atone for, and not to project onto others, which only activates embodied trauma and potentially results in even more harm. Nor do I feel that it's ethical to sidestep this shame in any way. Rather, in order to be who I feel that I am, I know that I must stand to face these shadows and fears within and without in all the ways they've shown up through time. As a result of this deep inner work, my whole life is dedicated to healing and rebalancing, one person, one ceremony at a time. My partner, Delak Patongli, Mountain Eagle, Washoe Elder, and I dream, as we continue to refine the conjoining of our medicine, of sharing our combined wisdom with all who seek it, so that they too may have access to their own inner wholeness and divinity, beyond the pain of historical trauma and the enduring consequences. I do not wish to show up as hero or savior, but rather as partner and ally who is willing to acknowledge the shadow of white supremacy. Those pathways are just beginning to open after years of listening and just being with others' stories and struggles. Coming straight from my heart, if I could not live this path, sharing the wisdom that I have been blessed to receive, contributing to the new earth, I would literally have no reason to be here on the planet. I've sang all the songs, drunk all the wine, made all the love. These things hold no compelling candle flame in my reason to be now. As my body enters the long phase of flickering and fading youth, as I enter the generativity of my elder years, there is only spirit giving me breath after yet another near-death experience. Since I am yet here, I am shown what is mine to do, and I show up in fierce courage. Thanks be, Spirit, thy will be done. And there are ways that my privilege can be medicine for myself and others when I remember humility, when I remain in eagle view, when I let spirit lead, and when I stay in my heart and set fear aside. So the next section is called The Devastating Truth and Promise of Oneness. In a moment, we will be discussing several prophecies that connect us with our sense of oneness across all the races. Although oneness may be a spiritual truth and goal for our ways of being here on earth, it is not so much a reality for those who have not benefited from the privilege of white supremacy. So, before we explore oneness, I have to note that spiritual fluff like we're all one, or it's all love and light, and other expressions of unity consciousness, or that was in the past and we've come so far, or I have lots of Black friends, so I'm not racist. Such phrases have been used to negate or bypass the very real pain that some have experienced as a result of white supremacy, racism, genocide, and other atrocities. The question asked may be, why can't we just move on? And yet our history dictates our current reality to the detriment especially of people of culture. And we cannot ethically choose to unsee this. It's important that we become ever more mindful of our ways of communicating so as not to diminish the experiences of others. What happened in the past has very real implications for everyday life in this era. Spiritual bypassing fails to acknowledge the very real and ongoing consequences of systems of oppression and of white privilege in general. It's an erasure of responsibility and accountability. It allows us to avoid the truly hard questions, such as, what am I going to do now with this awareness? And what am I willing to give up or to contribute to create a more just, peaceful, and equitable world? We absolutely have to address the very real consequences of our historical trauma in very practical ways without bypassing spiritually, without bypassing reality. But some who are more awakened would say that unity consciousness is the very goal we ultimately seek in creating a new world of peace, joy, harmony, and honor. My sacred path has been dynamic, diverse, but every road brings me back to one source. I trace Reiki to Japan, to Tibet, to the stars. I trace my shamanic tradition to Peru, to Lemuria, to the stars. The Stargate experience flows directly from the stars, so too the Akashic records. The ancestors of this land, my beloved guides who have supported my work so lovingly, also share wisdom of their connection to many sacred sites, all the way to Egypt, Tibet, Atlantis, Lemuria, the stars. And Dalak and I both identify strongly as star beings as well. Obviously, also, many white people have an affinity for nature, plants, and animal kind. From early years of youth, we may expand our imaginations and consciousness into union with spirit to see ourselves walking beside lion, horse, bear, unicorn. So, is this affiliation with nature a form of cultural appropriation? Archetypally, should someone have washed Christopher Robin's mouth with soap when he began to talk to Pooh and Piglet? Many indigenous people, like Black Elk and Fool's Crow, chose to share their wisdom with those who are willing to honor the teachings. Dalak and others have blessed us to live and share these ways, knowing it is our evolution as a species, as we are called to awakening and taking responsibility for the air, the water, the plants, the animals, the earth. My grandmother taught me the Gaelic origin of my name. My spiritual journey reconnected me with the old ways. My male ancestors wore stag antlers for the hunt on high holy feast days. They bedded the prepared maidens and maids in the fields and forests that night following the ceremony and celebration to honor the goddess energy of earth and fertility. Each and all days, the plants and animals were messengers and medicine from the gods to them. These memories are still embedded in my DNA. They still visit me in dream time. They still inform my relationship to all that is. My ancestral roots merge with what I am living now. We all, regardless of race, come from an indigenous background, pre-Christianity and pre-industrialization. Yet the influences of religion and technology have tragically all but obliterated our earthly historical roots, often carried only by oral tradition. When I consider how we have had, each of us, so many lives, shown up in so many ways, I feel in our diversity a reflection of the same source. For thousands of years on Earth, most of humanity has created division and separation on an unconscious and sometimes conscious level. The true tragedy of oneness is that we live in a reality that's so far from it. But I believe this is a contrary and very painful expression of our divine nature. I am so grateful for this time of awakening when we are remembering our true nature. I honor all levels of consciousness. We are each and all doing our best based on our level of awareness. I honor all wisdom as wisdom that is worthy. However, hate is never wisdom. Perhaps as we weave each of our spiritual paths together into a divine tapestry in service to our evolution, honoring each and all in their truth and experiences, our hearts may expand as we learn to live as expressions of love. This is my dream. So, the next section is the role of prophecy in our evolution. And we begin with another quote from Alberto Villoldo, although the citation is unknown. When the ancient masters imagined the times of the seven heavens, the ancient prophecy foretelling the dawn of a new era on planet Earth, They place their dreams and hopes in the hands of a new human, a person that, despite chaos and crisis, unswervingly seeks a shining light of the stars and sees opportunity to dream a new destiny for humanity. End quote. There have been many prophecies of these times, the most popular perhaps from the Mayans regarding 2012 as an end of an era and a new beginning. We may want to explore a few more prophecies to gain a broader view of current events. For example, as told by Thomas Branyaka Sr., the Hopi have predicted these times of social, political, and environmental devastation, where humanity will be forced to choose a path aligned with nature or meet with demise. He advises that prayer, meditation, and other spiritual practices will help us to rebalance the earth. And here's another quote from Floyd Red Crow Westerman. In the Hopi prophecy, they say that storms and floods will become greater. To me, it's not a negative thing to know that there will be great changes. It's not negative, it's evolution. When you look at it as evolution, it's time. Nothing stays the same. You should learn how to plant something. That is a first connection. You should treat all things as spirit. Realize that we are all one family. It's never something like the end. It's like life. There's no end to life. End quote. In congruence with this Hopi prophecy, Bruce Lipton and other renowned scientists articulate that we are in the process of the first human-made extinction on planet Earth. They say that our only hope is to come together as one human species, to return to animistic, indigenous, earth-honoring ways. If we choose to ignore this call, we may have to kiss this beautiful planet as we know it goodbye and surrender into a harsh, withering death cycle for our children's children. And another quote by Dr. Daniel Four. Animism is the way of approaching life that emphasizes relationships. Animists see the world as full of persons, both human and other than human, and prioritize living in respectful ways with these others. Animism is largely about ethics or core values that get expressed through practices, rituals, and traditions. Here are a few prophecies to explore. Above, we mention the transformation from the fourth world of separation to the fifth world of peace. In Sacred Path Cards, author Jamie Sams tells us of the prophecy of the Whirling Rainbow, the promise of peace through equality and the understanding that all races are one. When all pathways to wholeness are respected by all cultures, the prophecy of the Whirling Rainbow will be completed. She tells of how before the time of the white buffalo return, there would be ancestors of the red race being born in white bodies. Quote, they will learn to walk the Earth Mother in balance again and reform the ideas of the white chiefs. These children will be tested as they were when the red ancestor, as they were when they were red ancestors, by the unnatural substances like fire, water, to see if they can remain on the sacred path. End quote. Some say this cycle began with the flower children of the 60s. Our earth changes serve as catalyst, where the warriors of the rainbow will have to awaken, remember the true identity, and understand the true nature of unity as we collectively heal the planet from the harm that we've caused. And another quote from Sams. The changes in our Earth Mother would create fear in her children, which would later lead to the understanding and unity of one planet, one people. End quote. The White Buffalo prophecy also talks about a time of radical changes where the birth of a white buffalo calf would mark the beginning of the changes, a coming together time of all the nations working as one. This calf, named Miracle, was born in 1994 on August 20th, my 32nd birthday, outside of Janesville, Wisconsin, on the Hyder farm. There has since been the birthing of several white buffalo calves. In fact, there was a mature white buffalo on the neighboring property when we moved to Oda B, our sacred sanctuary and training site for Sky Spirit Shamans. This era of the white buffalo may reflect the visions of Black Elk and Crazy Horse, where they saw all the nations coming together as one. There is a prophecy shared by many Indigenous people where there are sightings of eagle of the North Americas, symbolic of science, technology, and the sacred masculine, and condor of the South Americas, symbolic of spirituality, earth honoring, and the divine feminine. Flying wing to wing with one another, as marking the time of an emerging era of peace and a profound shift in the consciousness on Earth. There are also California condors, however, they have been endangered. In 1982, only 23 of these condors survived worldwide as a result of exemplary conservation partnership initiated by the Yurok tribe, and intensive captive breeding and reintroduction efforts. There are now over 300 California condors in the wild in California, Arizona, Utah, and Baja California. Some shamans of the South Americas, specifically the Q'ero of Peru, felt called to share their wisdom throughout the Western Hemisphere with the specific intent that it would blend into the North American cultures to serve the shift in consciousness. We are called into such a turning over time, where eagle and condor have been sighted flying together, and where collectively we all evolve into another kind of human sharing peace, compassion, and earth-honoring ways. This new human may be called Homo Luminous. Between now and what may become per the prophecies, many of us, myself included, feel as if we are in between worlds, without a strong toehold in either space, as the third-dimensional structures appear to be crumbling beneath our feet. During these shifts, some may feel called to tending and healing the ills of the third dimension's historical context and systems, for example, addressing environmentalism, racism, homelessness, etc. I believe that we must all be attentive to these causes in whatever level we feel called by Spirit. To spiritually bypass them in order to avoid our discomfort or shame is truly disservice to the whole of us and not at all healing, honoring, or shamanic. It's not good medicine. Some, too, like me, may be called to focus more awareness on anchoring in the new paradigm of unity. Such people may show up as visionaries, seers, writers, teachers, artists, scientists, innovators, etc., who show the world intriguing new possibilities, technologies, and evolutionary solutions to long-term problems, and more. And here's another quote from Rob Bresney. Fake enlightenment. If your quest for spiritual enlightenment doesn't enhance your ability to witness and heal the suffering of your fellow humans, then it's fake enlightenment. If your quest for spiritual enlightenment encourages you to imagine that expressing your personal freedom excuses you from caring for the health and well-being of your fellow humans, then it's fake enlightenment. If your quest for spiritual enlightenment allows or encourages you to ignore racism, bigotry, plutocracy, misogyny, and LGBTQ phobia, it's fake enlightenment, end quote. So how does shamans show up in these roles? I would say we are accountable for holding both views and roles as practical solutions people as well as visionaries. That's part of what it means for us to dance between worlds. We dance in the world of spirit in order to bring uncommon wisdom into the world that directly responds to our consensus reality. But this brings up an important conflict to face and address. On one hand, identifying with shamanic work as a white person infringes on people and communities of color who have held these practices since time immemorial. We have to explore in what ways we, as white shamans, may cause harm. On the other hand, we have been blessed with receiving wisdom that informs our sacred paths of service to the earth and to others. In some traditions, to walk away from our medicine or to choose not to express our sacred gifts, at best withholds value from those who may be served, or at worst, it may cause harm to ourselves or to our families by violating our agreement with spirit. As shamans, we are conscious dreamers who are able to hold many levels of perception at once. seeing the great expanse and responding energetically through ceremony, ritual, vision quest to become innovators of the multidimensional realms. So let's talk more about shamanism, which is the next section called shamanism. So, firstly, we acknowledge the problematic nature and controversy around acculturating the term shaman by anyone who is not indigenous. The term shaman may be rooted in Tungus, German, Russian, and Siberian culture. It's been used by anthropologists over time and across continents and cultures to apply to specific skill sets and roles that are similar across geographical boundaries. The term was historically used to refer to healers in indigenous cultures of the past and present. Nonetheless, shamanism has become something like a hot offering over the past several years across cultures, showing up in many variations as many people seek deeper expressions of healing than can be found through Western medicine. Some are drawn to enhance their experience of the great mystery of spirit in their lives. There's been both shadow and light in this expansion. The shadow aspects, in the shadow aspects, people have been harmed by medicine ceremonies provided without a safe energetic container, or participants gain unhealthy or dangerous spirits attached to them rather than the healing they seek. In addition, ceremonies may be offered without adequate support, for example, such as through plant medicine ceremonies that may create dramatic transformation without sufficient integration support, leading to mental health crises. As another example, years ago, there was a culturally appropriated and adapted New Age spiritual warrior retreat with an endurance and sweat lodge ceremony where 3 participants died and several more were injured. But there are also light aspects. There's so much beauty in shamanism, the desire to serve the earth, other people, and all our relations, inclusive of all beings with whom we share the planet. It seems that expansion of these values would surely provide benefit in ways that are much needed in times like these. I know that for me, these teachings have dramatically enhanced the teaching and services I provide. I've also been on an organic shamanic path, I believe, since my first near-death experience at 8 years old, where afterward I began to recover my past lives in indigenous cultures. I've also witnessed many shamans and students of shamanism serve our community in heroic ways, transcending untold fears, habits, restrictions, and more. I have also encountered so many who are on a shamanic path as set by spirit, but who have no support for the strange and even dangerous things they encounter without access to education and support. For these people especially, it's so important, I believe, to step up for them, to share wisdom and empower them on their path of service by helping them safely explore their sacred gifts and how to share them with integrity. So before I share my sense of the nature of shamanism, first I will tell you what it's not and why it's not, as these contexts have been misused to cause harm in some instances. So first, it is not a path of seeking and finding an endless spiritual bliss of living love and light every day. Rather, we have to face the shadows within and without. As we do our own work around shame and blame, we may come into a space of neutrality and inspired service around shadow. So we respond from love rather than fear in its many forms, such as anger, grief, shaming, and the need for control. Next. Shaman is not a cool title to bandy around or a way of dressing and adorning meant to impress friends and acquaintances. It is not a justification for offering unsolicited advice or healing upon others. It's also not a way to antagonize our families of origin by pushing their notion of weird. All of these intentions are an affront to the spirit of shamanism. This path doesn't make you special. In fact, it makes you distinctly unspecial. Without humility, there is no integrity. Next, it's not a fluffy boost for low self-esteem or an avoidance to doing our deeper work while still gaining a cool title. In fact, doing the work will likely further wreck self-esteem, at least in the short term. In order to serve with integrity, we must fully embrace our own healing at every level. And next, it's not a path for seekers who like to dabble in many spiritual traditions and wisdom without honoring the learning journey and integration in a committed way. Instead, this is a life of living in alignment with spirit day to day, fully honoring our tradition, rites, and ceremony, as well as the spiritual guidance we receive. It's definitely not a path for spiritual wimps. So to me, shamanism is purely and wholly a path of commitment and heartfelt service to our communities, to our world, and to our earth, and to the journey of conscious evolution that we all share. The process of becoming a shaman is a journey of allowing spirit to shake us up and wake us up so thoroughly that sometimes we will feel like we're spinning. It's a calling, answered by a choice, a lifestyle, a commitment to carrying and sharing the light of spirit as we dance between worlds and anchor in honoring ways of living in this dimension. It's a path of stepping up on behalf of other beings, of all our relations, especially the most vulnerable in our population. We have passion, respect, and love in our hearts for our communities and all the souls we call family. Human, land, animals, plants, rocks, trees, and all the ancestors and spirits, seen and unseen. We show up for our families through practical advocacy, through ceremony and ritual, and through the transformational powers of sacred fire. It means standing for a world that's more healthy, just, honoring, and equality based. So now we'll enter into the next section, which is Sky Spirit Shamans. And embracing this destiny, a path where my heart, soul, and spirit meet service, Sky Spirit Shamans was birthed, an offering for our community and world in deepest humbleness, honoring and gratitude to the ancient ones, our ancestors, and all the indigenous peoples and cultures who have provided healing wisdom since time immemorial. I, Denise Sheehan, receive the greatest life-changing wisdom from many teachers in my path as shaman, Reiki Master Teacher, Certified Life Coach, and Stargate Experience Facilitator. In an ethereal way, I was also activated as Galactic Shaman, whereby I experienced direct contact through spiritual journey with the ancestors of this land, ascended masters, archangels, star families, and other spirit guides who desire to work through me in sharing the ancient healing and wisdom traditions in service to all life and to our beloved Earth herself. Sky Spirit Shamans, a 2-year program, was birthed in 2017, created in response to a sense of calling and an offer of support and service to my guides. So it seems I have a natural tendency to dance between worlds and to see the unseen, but I never thought I would be able to access the sacred teachings of our indigenous peoples, given the white body in which I reside. Without seeking access to a teacher or the teachings outside of books, Spirit provided a miracle in the form of a best friend and teacher of shamanic traditions, Jeffrey Taltrees of Sacred Rainbow Mesa. It has been the honor of a lifetime to be able to share, with the support of my teacher, the wisdom that I've been gifted by her, along with the other wisdom teachings that came along too in my journey. I also acknowledge that I am forever mindful of my privilege as a white-bodied person to share as I do. I have also been honored to include the teachings of Delak Patongli and other Indigenous instructors who bring essential wisdom into our spaces. Delak especially has brought something uniquely beautiful to our offerings as he has become more and more involved as faculty as the program evolved. We are so honored to include his wisdom carried from his ancestors. He also teaches us what it is to live as an Indigenous person in this time, to carry the atrocities of the past, and also to embody hope and wisdom for the future. His own life experience becomes a map for our expanding awareness, as well as our own social justice inspirations. And a quote from Delak. My name is Mountain Eagle. I am from the First Nations here in North America. Washishu is what we call ourselves, which translates as all the people. This includes land, air, water, animal, human, and those other untold entities. In my life, I learned many things from all the people. Nature is my teacher. I witnessed and remembered the songs and stories of my elders and ancestors. My life has been shaped by both the hardship and beauty of my people. I returned into this life after a long sleep from earth, protecting the medicine of my people. I bring you all practices that many humans have forgotten that can connect each and every one of us to the source of creation. Our intentions are very great and powerful. We are given life in the image of the Creator, which is full of love, respect, honor, courage, and compassion, all of which can be added to the pool of intention. Our intentions go into the electromagnetic wave which surrounds the earth so that healing can begin. I have come to honor you, my brothers and sisters, by offering you a custom from the Washishu, sharing myself in this way with each and every person who wishes to be a good caretaker, manager, and listener. End quote. Sky Spirit Shamans is a non-traditional evolutionary form of neo-shamanism, integrating multiple modalities, including indigenous Washishu wisdom, Inca medicine wheel, Stargate, coactive and real love coaching, Reiki, and psychic capacity. Our shamanic content is non-traditional, nor rooted in any one culture. Not rooted in any one culture. Because of the strong influence of the Stargate in our healing work, we may consider ourselves galactic shamans, as we experience Earth in the context of the totality of our multi-universe and our multidimensional reality. We dance in both the physical and non-physical realms, and we understand that consciousness is shifting to promote conscious evolution. So what do we explore on our journey as Sky Spirit Shamans? First and foremost, we engage with multiple healing modalities to heal ourselves. Without such healing, we dwell in the land of fear and shadow, creating intentional and unintentional harm as we go through life, whether we become aware of it or not. We awaken and activate innate and archetypal spiritual and shamanic gifts and abilities in a creative, empowering community of support through ceremony. We become energetic activists in service to all that is, with grace and ease. We show up fully to facilitate and empower healing for others, whether they have the means to pay or not, inclusive of all races, ethnicities, cultures, classes, abilities, genders, and sexual identities, etc. Expressing fierce courage in facing the malevolent energies and spirits in this world to protect and free those who come to us from hell. Above all, we commit our lives to service, to spirit and to earth. When we call on spirit to support us, we trust. When spirit calls us to a particular path, we trust and follow, no matter how our minds may guide us elsewhere. As called by spirit, we may show up as healers, environmental activists, social justice advocates, and more. Each journey is unique, bringing us into alignment with spirit, helping us to reveal and share our unique sacred gifts. Seeing ourselves as a hollow bone or clear channel for spirit allows our egos to surrender softly into the process of serving. Ultimately, this is a path of love, helping us to expand our hearts to embrace love of all life. It takes us on a journey of releasing all that's not love within ourselves, which, by the way, is not always pleasant to face. As we've discussed, cultural appropriation may be viewed as adopting elements of another culture, especially in a way that disrespects the original culture. These are some aspects of cultural appropriation that we consider as Sky Spirit Shamans. A lizard just went by. To ensure the greatest level of respect, honoring, and integrity possible of people, cultures, spirit, and self. So the first category is facing injustice. So first, we cannot look away from the past and present implications of racism and colonization. If we are here in service to the global shift in consciousness, and we are, then this too is essential to the journey. If we look away, we are not who we say we are. Our inner work helps ensure that our thoughts, words, and actions do not contribute to a culture of racism and colonization. And we actively create and cultivate a culture of honoring, directly addressing racism, bigotry, plutocracy, misogyny, and LGBTQ phobia. And another category, inclusion. We prioritize empowering Indigenous peoples and communities to share their wisdom, to be involved in co-creation in products and services, to listen to their voices, to help us grow in cultural awareness and competency. And whenever we practice open sacred space for an event, etc., we may honor the ones on whose stolen sacred land we stand. Whenever possible, we may ask permission from the local Indigenous peoples to practice or hold events. And we elevate, empower, and support BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color through recruitment, scholarship, community outreach, mentoring, travel, and logistics support, sponsoring training, hosting ceremonial events, providing honorariums, donations, and other financial support. Next category, personal awareness and integrity. Real love coaching and restorative justice principles are components of our work, which empowers community building through the ability to see and tell the truth about ourselves, to own up to our mistakes, and to be held accountable, which is essential for any practitioner dedicated to this work. And we consider every aspect of our choices and actions in their alignment and service to the greater good. And we honor our connection to spirit and the sacred gifts we are here to explore. And we do not claim to belong to any other race or culture. We are not Peruvian shamans, even though the Inca medicine wheel serves as a foundation for our journey. Our shamanic content is not traditional nor rooted in any one culture. And there is a legacy of trust, teacher to student, teacher to teacher, where express permission is given for students becoming teachers, and where adaptations may be made over time to keep content relevant. And we consider our communication in order to ensure that our words are healing and honoring. We may ponder our use of the title shaman, as there may be more accurate terms to describe our path of service. And it's infinitely important to explore the implications of our choices and upgrade our thoughts, communications, and actions around cultural appropriation. We may encounter anger or hostility as we go, and it's important to feel solid in our choices and actions. When challenged by others for identifying as or for serving as shamans, it's important to stand in integrity, not defensiveness. We engage as an active listener and demonstrate respect and reverence for the question and the asker, which can transform the spirit experience for both or all parties. And the last category for this, supporting conscious evolution. The length, depth, and support of training is comprehensive, not superficial like a weekend retreat or a few plant medicine ceremonies. And indoctrination in any shamanic program is an invitation to spirit to work through us, to transform us in our lives. It won't necessarily be an easy process. We get what we need to show up in service and integrity. And we host an ethics think tank to create a comprehensive code of ethics, plus to integrate and address systemic approaches to anti-racism, decolonization, and cultural appropriation, while providing a working foundation for the collective code of ethics development process. And here's another quote from Tuck and Yang. Decolonization will require a change in the order of the world. This is not to say that Indigenous peoples or Black or Brown peoples will take positions of dominance over white settlers. The goal is not for everyone to merely swap spots on the settler colonial triad, to take another turn on the merry-go-round. The goal is to break the relentlessness, the relentless structuring of a triad, a break and not a compromise. Breaking the settler colonial triad, in direct terms, means repatriating land to sovereign natives, tribes, and nations, abolition of slavery in its contemporary forms, and then dismantling of the imperial metropole. End quote. So So, what we've done to date as Sky Spirit Shamans is only the beginning. We have a commitment to ongoing exploration for addressing racism, decolonization, and cultural appropriation, which includes possible structural changes to Sky Spirit Shamans. We are very excited to be considering and implementing these enhancements to our planning. 1. Provide Indigenous community outreach and support, including the formation of an Elders Council for supporting their needs and expression, as well as opening to receive wisdom and advice to deepen integrity on our path. And create accountability structures with model language for marketing and product copy for all our programs and offerings to ensure the most ethical presentation of our work as possible, which can include peer review of each other's websites. And expand our awareness of marketing, commodification, and selling that deny and dishonor the spirit of shamanism and spirituality in general. Also, in the interest of respectful transparency, we may clearly identify ourselves by race, especially if we are white, state our values around anti-racism, equity, and accessibility work, articulate how we may define our service population when relevant, and note how we are creating accessible, nonviolent spaces for marginalized communities, and especially for BIPOC people. And consider a name change for the program to one that's accurate, but without the sense of cultural appropriation. And establish leadership from our multiple IUs or families of students for specific ethics-related topics and/or projects. We will explore our collective values and code of ethics to enhance and clarify the codes we live and practice by, identifying and articulating ethical issues that come up so we can create meetings to work through an array of ethical solutions together as needed. Plus, we'll create a resource review group for exploring racism-related issues, create an ethics think tank for the broader community, perhaps supported by Alchemist Movement as well as Sky Spirit, share in community service projects serving the Earth, community members, international causes, etc., and create a safe space and support group type setting to consider in our personal growth journeys, like exploring limiting beliefs and other shadows. And expand the structure of the program to be even more comprehensive, perhaps even to a 2.5 or 3 year program. Additions and expansions may include added or enhanced curriculum on a pre-program training on racism, deeper exploration of cultural appropriation and shamanism, anti-racism, trauma, power, and privilege, plus how to be an ally, advocacy, decolonization, social justice, and restorative justice training, cultural competency, including creating safe spaces with inclusivity and access to all service and events for people of color as trainers and also as students, including recruiting and scholarship, etc. On consent culture, on environmental activism, lifestyle to lobbying, enhancements to coactive and real love coaching, including at least one 4-day vision quest at Mountain Eagle School or other sacred sites with prep and supervision by DeLocke. Discussion on how deep implications of being self-referencing as shamans and how fear and pain avoidance and corrupt the process and when, why peer review is needed. May also consider a pass-fail evaluation at 1 year to determine continued participation in the program. Criteria may include and be quantified around these themes, providing session notes, demonstrate commitment to the practices, demonstrate heartfulness, and demonstrating respect for the path. Below, I've included a discussion of ethics along with a working document, the Sky Spirit Shamans Code of Ethics. So, bringing in the last couple sections here, a broader category of ethics. So we'll begin with a section, Ethics Defined. So what is ethics? Ethics is, to me, an extension and clear articulation of what may be included in a more personal view of integrity. Codes of ethics are articulated standards that help to inform us in a way that, above all, we do no harm. This is important, especially for those in helping professions. At the same time, shamans are self referencing in that we have experiences and make our own meaning in response. One way of viewing self referencing is exploring how we may step outside of societal norms to follow a path that's more authentic to us or truer to our connection with spirit. Is there a contradiction between following codes of ethics and becoming self referencing? To respond to this question, it may be useful to look at the distinction between moral, immoral, and amoral. Someone who is moral follows societal principles of right or legal behavior, perhaps without question, and these principles may or may not be beneficial just because they are perceived to be so. For example, look at the way cultural norms and the perception of right have shifted as a consequence of the civil rights movement. And someone who is immoral knowingly violates those principles, similar to rebellion, potentially in a way that causes harm to others. And someone who is amoral doesn't know the difference between right and wrong and could unwittingly and unintentionally cause harm to others. The development of a code of ethics can help us to build a moral compass or character, and at times may ground us in our best thinking when we may be confused or tempted off course. At the same time, as self referencing shamans, we may acknowledge the complexity of the human condition and the limitations of any set in stone principles meant to be applied in any and all situations. To have a committee for ongoing reflection and adaptation can challenge each and all of us in a way that enhances consciousness, even as it strengthens the moral compass of the entire community. At the very least, when we may choose to stray from prospective standards of behavior, it's helpful to have the self-awareness to know why and how it may inform the quality of our services. So let me clarify. In my former career around community health, I created and taught many ethics courses as well. What I learned is that guidelines can seem relatively clear on the surface and then suddenly come to life in fascinating ways when groups gather to explore the deeper implications and applications in the real world. I found such values in the ways that groups would think about issues and talk through them. This can involve an element of vulnerability, in that we may discover perceptions that shift our reality. We may find ourselves evolving into new, more informed truths. For me, this is the path of authenticity with integrity as we expand our consciousness in the process. So, just as we undergo a consciousness and paradigm shift in our world and community dynamics, we may find value in collaboratively responding to complex truths. In the complexity of our world, as consciousness expands, a code of ethics will provide a dynamic foundation for complex exploration, interpretation, and revision as needed. It is the nature of a collaborative to deeply commit to investigating any potential conflicts and to create resolution with integrity. It's not that there's an absolute truth from all perspectives, but that there is a strong motivation to open to exploring sometimes uncomfortable truths, to expand wisdom, and to act in ways that promote well-being and thriving for all members of our community. May this foundation for a code of ethics initiate some depth of thought as they apply to ourselves and the way we live, knowing all that we think, say, and do, and be impacts many others in addition to ourselves. May we be willing to explore these on our own and in community, and to let them evolve and grow as we do. May they serve in our paths of empowerment, integrity, and transformation. So, Code of Ethics, a working document. A working document meaning that it will be forever dynamic and fluid as needs change. So, the first category is personal integrity. Stay consistent and true to your spiritual practices, rituals, and ceremonies so that you are always aligned with walking your talk. Show up with a spirit of service, allowing your visionary spirit, joyful nature, and loving heart to guide your experience. Contribute to the heartfulness of sessions and events by balancing your own energies prior. Please see a provider or healthcare professional as needed. Enhanced self-awareness provides the foundation for integrity. Remain involved in your own healing journey physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Acknowledge personal issues that may impair, conflict with, or interfere with professional performance and relationships in ways that protect the vulnerability of those we serve. As needed, consult with helping professionals and cease providing services until healing has been completed. We may also engage in peer exchange, having our personal and professional presence assessed and supportive recommendations offered. Whenever there's a perceived potential ethics or moral violation involving you or the community, seek assistance by reporting the situation as quickly as possible to the appropriate authorities, withholding information that would violate confidentiality guidelines in any way. And seek to be conscious of any conflict or potential conflict of interest, openly disclosing any such conflict, and offer to remove yourself when a conflict arises. The second category is professional conduct. Never engage in illegal or immoral behaviors with clients or colleagues at events or in your private practices, including, but not limited to, subcategories here: touching genitals or breasts, asking clients to disrobe, making suggestive sexual comments, jokes, or references, initiating or pursuing romantic sexual relationships with clients and students, using drugs or alcohol before or during sessions or events, promising ability of Reiki or other healing arts to provide healing or a cure, or diagnosing imbalances or disease, recommending medications or abstaining from medications. And those are the subcategories for that one. Now we'll move on to other points. We only provide services for which we've become qualified through training, education, and/or personal experience, and for which we've achieved competence. And we are aware of the potential for deep and rapid transformation amongst those we serve. We operate only with full disclosure about our offerings and consent from our clients. We support, to the greatest extent possible, physical safety and emotional health. We demonstrate loving regard for all life by ensuring those we serve have follow-up support as needed. Be completely honest in all communications, including but not limited to convey credentials, certifications, qualifications, expertise, training background, and experience clearly and accurately on websites and all other formal materials, and be clear on values, benefits, the nature of services, and pricing for all services and trainings offered. Also, we may engage in referral services. Although we may engage in referral services, always hold client confidentiality with regard to name, conditions, etc., unless you have explicit permission to share. Whenever guided, refer clients to other healthcare providers and psychological services, in addition to or in lieu of services provided by you. Maintain, store, and dispose of any records, including electronic files and communications, in a manner that promotes confidentiality, security, and privacy, and complies with all applicable laws and agreements. And offer all professionals in the community. Refrain from making negative statements about other professional providers in our community. And never use another person's copyrighted materials in your classes, websites, or literature without permission and/or giving credit. Failure to abide by this code may result in legal action by authors or borrowed materials. Encourage clients and students to use their own inner guidance in determining who to go to for services and/or training. Respect their right to terminate professional services or training at any time. And in all ways, cultivate cultural awareness, empathy, and wisdom. Refrain from unlawful discrimination in all professional activities, including age, race, gender, orientation, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, national origin, or disability. continuing that point, actively engage in anti-racism in all aspects of life. And be mindful of personal and organizational ambition, as well as the potential harm that marketing strategies and monetary focus have on our helping profession and clients. Strive to create space for actively serving those with no means to pay or make donations. And be grateful for all the gifts Spirit has blessed you with and for all the ways the universe supports your expression of them. Whenever possible, provide payment or love offerings for the organizers of events and services who contribute many hours of preparation through marketing, preparing, and space organization. Balance in giving and receiving provides a foundation for thriving for all of us. So, having shared all of that and honoring all of the contributors to this creation and to the teachers, mentors, guides, authors, all who have showed up, I just want to say that any errors in judgment through any of that are completely my own. And I am in complete honoring of all of the wisdom keepers who have helped me to evolve myself and to be able to create and share this. And I do want to share some sources that are cited in this document. The Code of Ethics sources are adapted from the International Center for Reiki Training, the International Coach Federation, and also from the Council on Spiritual Practices. And that draft was from August 10th, 2001. And other sources. Thomas Branyaka Sr., A Hopi Prophecy, and that is on YouTube, retrieved on April 2021. The date for that video was in 1995. Also, Rob Bresney, from Rob Bresney's Astrological Newsletter, dated April 28th, 1921. And also, Rizma Menachem, My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma on the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies, by Central Recovery Press in Las Vegas, published in 2017. And also Jamie Sams and her Sacred Path Cards, The Discovery of Self Through Native Teachings, published by HarperCollins in New York, 1990. And then a research publication by Eve Tuck and Wayne Yang, Decolonization is Not a Metaphor, and the publication Decolonization, Indigeneity, Education and Society, and that was from 2012. And also from Floyd Red Crow Westerman in his YouTube video, Indigenous Native American Prophecy, Elders Speak, Part 1, and also Wikipedia on Cultural Appropriation. So my hope is that this will be a foundation for further discussion, and that we can come together in community and look at these many aspects and help and support one another to grow in our consciousness as we embody wisdom in deeper and deeper ways, especially in ways that honor the earth and honor all our relations, including all people and people of color. So having said that, I welcome your comments below, and I especially welcome feedback from all BIPOC people, but all people in general. And any questions or ways that I can support you, I invite you to reach out to me. And I thank you so much for being here through the entirety of this and for being willing to expand your consciousness around these issues. I really appreciate all the ways that you show up as light workers and wisdom keepers and healers and shamans and medicine people from all the different traditions. And I bless you on your journey with so much love.